don't want a lot of creative writing. We want them to be very precise in their language, and if they've found certain results in this particular lab, we don't want them to extrapolate those to things that aren't reasonable based on what they found. And what's really interesting is that you can tell the first couple of lab reports, they're coming from a creative write. They've had courses where they've had to write creatively, so you get lots of flowery language, that's not scientific at all, and then they're very frustrated because they've tried to write what they think is a terrific lab report, and you've gone through it and hacked out about 2/3 of the words, the adjectives that they use, and so that's been a disconnect for us. So they've had courses where they've sort of had to write a certain way, and then in this course it's a completely different type of writing, and there's some frustration early on until they get the sense that you don't want creative writing, you want something that's more scientific to the point.
I teach an undergraduate class in argumentation, and one of the things I realized early on was that most of my students are fairly accustomed to reading expository prose, and so they're pretty good at summarizing what they read, but they're not necessarily good at engaging it. They don't really know what to ask of the author. They don't really know how to be skeptical without just being dismissive, or how to be just completely passive, or they know how to be completely passive and so I have an assignment.
So the thing that I really like about the online writing environment is it gives you a way to quickly give them feedback. So there's this clipboard over here. What you do is you go through and highlight this, and it allows you to grade the grammar and the content much more quickly. So I'll use bold text for my own substantive comments to put in there. Then it emails it directly to them, and they see what the issue is, but it's not like some people will use track changes. You're not doing the work for them. You're just telling them there's a problem with your APA referencing there. So the first time I'll go through and I'll make the comment what it is, and then after that you're just highlighting it, and it gives them, you go through it much more quickly when you're giving them feedback. This was a good paper here, so there's not much in the way of feedback. But yeah, again, here's a sentence structure problem. You just highlight it and move on. So what I'll do is I'll do this as a draft assignment. So the writing consultant will go through using this clipboard the first time through. We'll give the students feedback in an ungraded format. And then down at the bottom, when you get all the way down here, you assign rubrics to them. And then I use them, that's how I form my grade. But I find that when you use the rubrics, you can tell them, I'm giving you feedback specifically on how well you use APA format. And that's not necessarily the same, that's a component part of your grade, but it's not the same as your grade. So they get, and I'll vary my assignments to focus them on different aspects. So I won't use, the development wouldn't be part of more than one assignment. I want them to work on that within, or think about that within a specific assignment context. And then this way you get, to me the online environment gives you a means through which communicating rapidly with them and grading rapidly in a meaningful way.
I actually do this a couple of times in different ways in this class, where I ask them to find a passage, or I give them a passage, make an electronic copy of it, and then basically write in between each sentence some kind of question that they would ask of the author. Basically, this is just an explanation. The idea that one of the ways that experts read that novices typically don't is they engage the text directly. So they'll read a sentence, and they'll stop and they'll ask themselves a couple of questions. The first one, if they're really engaging the text, is, did I understand what they just said? Can I paraphrase it? And then the next question is, do I believe it? Or, better yet, what evidence have they provided to support what they've just said? Does this require any kind of evidentiary support? Do they need to explain where the data came from? The kinds of questions that we would instinctively ask of someone else in our discipline if we were reading their work, but which our students don't really have any idea how to do. So I model this for them, and then I ask them to do it a few times. And one of the things I noticed the first time I started doing this was that some of the students asked questions that they should have been able to answer themselves, like, what does this word mean? Or, I don't understand, which isn't even a question. But so there's this sort of, I realized that there are kind of two versions of this. One is the expository version, where you're just asking them to ask questions to make sure that they understand what they're reading. which is kind of like involved summary, and then the next is to actually critically engage the text. Is this believable? Is it true? And then, so the model I give them is really fish in a barrel. I took something that Ann Coulter wrote. Because Ann Coulter is sort of the perfect example of what I don't want them to do, right? She's writing as if she's speaking the truth, only everything she's saying is highly contentious, and even if she has any data to support any of it, most of the time I don't think she does, it's all buried and implicit, right? So I'm trying to teach my students how to argue rather than rant. And so I try to use reading in a active manner as a way of trying to teach this to them. So in this particular example, what I've got is a couple of paragraphs from a book she wrote, and then I went and wrote comments in between the sentences. It's online, so it's hypertext like this, but they do it just by putting square brackets at the end of every sentence and writing a question in response to what they said. So, of all single mothers in America, only, so, you know, recognizing the adjectives and whether or not they're warranted and whether or not they've been fairly grounded and stuff like that. And then the meaning of specific words, and also the meaning of the percentages and where the data came from, and all of the questions that we would, I think, instinctively ask of any argumentative piece we read, especially if it were a covertly argumentative piece and it pissed us off. You know, so if she were in the room, we'd have a bunch of questions to ask of her. I mean, I don't think that well, I'm sure that it doesn't really occur to my students what questions to ask. So we talk about how to engage a text at that level.
Assignments, the one either at the beginning of class or end of class, just saying at the beginning of class, what were the 2 main points in the reading you did last night? Just having them write that, hand it in, or call on a few people to read it. And what would that accomplish? I mean, it's not taking up any time. It's not causing you to spend a lot of time grading, but what could you imagine that could accomplish?
Do the reading.
Yeah, did they do the reading? What else would that accomplish? Just asking them, what were the 2 main points?
Makes them articulate it, you know, in a way. Writing it down is maybe different from, they have to actually think about it.
Yeah, often when it's just, you know, they'll just start shouting out stuff and then eventually someone will get it, or, you know, but it hasn't shown. And so if someone gets it wrong and they didn't read it out loud, or they didn't say it out loud, if they've got it written down, they know they were wrong. Otherwise they can say, well, I wasn't really thinking about it.
If they know that you're going to be doing this before most classes, while they're doing the readings, they'll be thinking in terms of what are the main points.
Yeah, you're teaching them to read. They don't, I mean, they know how to read. But they don't know, many of them don't know how to read as a student. That they should be, they just look at it as, this is everything they said, and I'll try to kind of say everything that they said. Whereas we have all been successful in school. We knew somehow early on to look for major points and identify those major points. I mean, that's a huge step. And so, yeah, if they're reading every night, knowing that occasionally you ask this question, they're going to start looking for those main points. Once again, something that doesn't take up any time, or very little time, gives you a good sense of who's read, who hasn't read, who's struggling with basic skills, who's not. And so that could be something that you collected and read a couple out, or call on people, or however is more effective for the size and type of class. But so that would be kind of the most basic. So you could do the same thing at the end of your lecture. What was the main point of my lecture today? But you can also sometimes find out, oh, nobody's getting what I'm saying, so I need to think about how I'm doing. I mean, you get feedback on your teaching as well, or the readings that you're giving. Or sometimes they'll see something that you didn't see. Wow, I didn't mean to focus that be the major part of my lecture, but yeah, it did kind of come across that way.
The bottom of it, but some of these, I know the students, and I would have never thought that they'd be writing what they're writing. I had students who said, you know, I felt about the death penalty one way. I now know I have to support my opinion with different ethical frameworks, giving different populations that I'm talking to.
Wow.
And she was struggling with this class when she started it this semester.
Pretty cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
For sharing. Cool.